which we haven't got to the general part yet, but we might as well go there since you're already here, which is, we know the amount is 45 million, right? The other smaller projects is a 5 million and a million, and we can talk about those. We'll talk about them next, but go ahead, Scott.
Okay. So we have a 45 million ask. Part of it is design, part of it is construction. It's likely the design phase would be a short-term borrowing for a year or two. Then the construction would follow after that, probably in a couple of chunks, if you will, rather than all at once, depending on the construction timeline. So again, probably not a permanent borrowing for another 3 to 4 fiscal years. Using the similar sort of analysis and math, this one we do have to pay interest on. I'm using a level debt service at 4%. Our most recent issuance that we approved a month ago was 3.6-ish. I'd rather be a little more conservative. For FY25, your tax rate impact is 39 cents per thousand. So if we borrowed this all this year, the 624 that is our current tax rate, we'd add the 39 to it, and we'd be at 6.63. Again, using that $850,000 home, the firehouse would be about $331 a year increase on the taxes, which is $27 a month, roughly 6.25%. And again, whether we change the house value or not, all house values would see a 6.25% return. It's just on a larger tax bill or a smaller one. And again, here's the high notes at the bottom, same as from the other chart. You know, as our assessed values rise, the tax rate implication would be a bit lower in the future, likely to be the case. But this is a large ask. If this was all borrowed today in FY25, this is an accurate rendering. Everyone's tax rates would increase 6.25%. So that's a good number to use for any citizen. Yes?
Do we have any significant debt load dropping off?
Well, I guess the good part of both of these projects is there is drop-off and debt paid down over the next 4 years till one of these potentially comes online as a permanent financing. We've always got items that were issued years ago coming due. There's a large land purchase, the final payment, we borrowed it 20 years ago. It comes due next year, these types of things. So there's always going to be some roll-off. But I got to say that with the sewer project, it is a mandated thing. We have more coming on. Fortunately, it's not as bad as it could be if we were paying interest on it. But it's always going to be there, and it's always going to be looming. And I dare say there will be more coming on than coming off. Yes?
But I had that question too that Andrea asked, and I think it's probably too complicated to try to do, but when you start giving people the impact of a specific segregated borrowing on their tax rate, it loses the context of how that is going to really appear in their tax bills, because there's other moving pieces and debt changes that might lower that or raise it. Well, probably I'm really talking about lowering it. And if it's
It's not an exact science. There's a
Right.
lot of moving pieces.
But
What's
I
the
guess-
best we can do to try and give someone some clarity on what this might cost me? You know, we often see this type of thing. Well, it adds X amount per thousand. I think for years we sort of did that in the warrant, but I think maybe adding a dollar amount per dwelling or a percentage is a little more transparency that some people could grasp a little better. Maybe we want to start doing this.
Right, it's easier to explain to people, when it comes online, it's gonna cost around $30 a month for a house that's about $850, right? And so if your house is more than that, it's gonna cost a little bit more. If it's less than that, it's gonna be a little bit less. But that's just so they have an idea of what the number is, because most people don't understand cents per thousand times. I mean, they're not doing that. They really wanna know, and they wanna be able to decide when they're casting their votes, right? Is this worth it to them in any given year, right? So, at this time, right? So I think this is helpful. information, at least conversationally for people to have, so they get a real idea of quantifying, right? Because it's, the way that we do the borrowing here with so many bands, and quite honestly, it's actually so useful, because you think about a project like Rock Harbor, in which you get $1 million grant, right? You don't have to borrow an amount. I mean, the alternative would be borrowing it all right away and not accounting for potential offsets for grants that come in. So you're stuck, you borrowed too much, and then you have to go back. And so it actually really helps to make sure that what we're actually borrowing is the amount of money that we need to borrow, rather than anything beyond that.
And now, being pressed for time, we of course could do this for all of the projects for the FY '26. I think the next in line, one that's been discussed at
Scott,
the,
can I just ask one other question? That's back on the sewer.
Yep.
And you were saying that phases 1, 2, and 3 were all roughly $40 million on
average.
average. Are all those pre-Cape and Water, the Water Protection Fund awards of 25% or post?
The first, well, those are pre-Cape and Islands numbers, yes. So the actual borrow was less than that. That would be the face value amount, if you will.
Right. So all I'm saying is that the award is substantial enough that if that was factored in there, those numbers would be significantly changed.
Correct, that's right.
Just one important point on that, though, is it changed from a subsidy model, Mev. So the full debt is now the full debt. The way the subsidy is applied is through a debt service model for the term of the borrowing.
Right, that's correct. For phase one was a
Right.
different.
Phase 1 was a true
different.
subsidy. Phases 2 and 3 going forward, only because the change at the Clean Water Trust and with the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund was, we could not sustain a 25% subsidy every 3 or 4 years for the volume and dollar cost of projects. So working to change it to a debt service model allows us to take on more projects and still get the same benefit for the town, at least those that are 0%
Yes.
interest.
One could, as an example, with this example, if you took 25% of all of these numbers, that gets you to the Bay Ridge Design and Construction, for example. It's that easy just to cut them. So we could slice this up and apply it to the other projects. I didn't have a chance to get all of them at the same time.
This is really helpful.
yeah.
But this is the,
Yeah.
these are the big ones.
I think 2 takeaways for anybody listening is Scott and Brad are always conservative in what they give us, meaning you're overshooting a little on interest rate, you're not overshooting on the impacts, but at the same time, as you said, remind folks that these are not going to hit the books for sometimes 4 or even 5 years. So we're looking at just a scenario. This is not really going to hit your tax bill next year. It's going to be way out there.
Yay. Yeah, Mike.
It's saying no.
It's still gonna hit, right?
My reaction